As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
Hey everyone, welcome to Strong Mind, Strong Body. I'm your host, Angie Miller. Today I have a very special guest who lives in Canada, and he has a story about resilience. And I think that we all love these comeback stories, these stories of resilience that remind us that no matter how tough things get, there's always, a flip side. There's always a way that we're going to come through on the other side and figure out our next step and kind of come out from underneath of it all. So this episode today is called The Rise from Rock Bottom, Building Back After Loss. My guest is Jesse Benson, and he is an NASM educator. He's also an award-winning trainer. And during the pandemic, Jesse lost his business, his marriage, his pet, and all of his income vanished. But since that time, he's gone on to win awards. And this, again, is a story of resilience. So I want to bring Jesse in and have him introduce himself. How you doing, Jesse?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much, Angie, for having me on your show.
You bet. So before we even get started, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and kind of give us a background of what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, thanks so much. So I do reside over in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So we're up north. And on a day-to-day basis, I operate 4 teams now. I have 2 physical facilities. And we also are NASM's Canadian partners. So we distribute all of NASM's courses across Canada. We certify hundreds of trainers. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm doing a wide range of things, from managing onboarding trainers, certifying client, facility management, a little bit of everything. You could say.
Yeah. A jack of all trades when you have 4 teams and 2 facilities, I would say, right?
Correct. Yeah. Keeps me busy.
So Jesse, you and I spoke. I met Jesse through a friend, actually, who also hosts a podcast. And she told me Jesse was amazing and he has a great story. Jesse, you had mentioned to me that during the pandemic, you hit rock bottom. You lost your marriage, you lost your pet, you lost your income, you lost your business. I have a question for you, and I'm just curious, what was the darkest moment of that journey? And how did you figure out, or how did you find that strength to take that first step forward?
Wow, you want to get right to it. The darkest moment was when I was under so much. I've experienced stress. I'm an entrepreneur. I've experienced every single kind of sleepless night you could imagine. But when I was under so much duress and stress and hopelessness that I was no longer able to process coherent thought, that was when I hit rock bottom. My brain was under so much overwhelming stress. It couldn't process basic thought. I had to lie down. I had to physically lie down because my brain was melting. That's what it felt like. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with my father where I just leaned on him real hard that day. It was in a stairwell in the back of the gym. I never let anyone see me like this. The team would not have known this was happening. The clients would have never known this was happening. But of course, I had to lean on my father. And I just, told my dad, I can't do it. I don't know what I can do. I don't see a way forward. And his response was, God only made one Jesse Benson. And it was in that instant that I understood exactly what he meant, which was that, I've been blessed with unique gifts. I've been blessed with 2 working hands. there's always a way forward. And I couldn't argue that with him. I had to move forward, and that's what I managed to do. So when I look back on the deepest, darkest moment, that was it, and that was how I moved forward.
Mm. Well, thank you, first of all, for sharing that. I felt that here, and I really appreciate that. And to dive right into the dark end of the pool, and to just know that that was what grounded you. Your dad saying, "God only made one Jesse Benson," and then having you kind of come back to you and saying, because in the end, we all know that when we truly hit rock bottom, I believe, I believe there's two things that get us out. One is having support, and one is being reminded that we have the power within us to solve our own problems. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I agree that it's within us. It's not external us. In our deepest selves are our highest truths, and so those are things that we need to seek and we need to ultimately find. Yes, there's people around us that can help guide you, but there's nobody out there with the magic answer. There's no special formula. You're not going to, again, find it outside of yourself. So you're right, Angie. You've got to go in, you got to go deep, and you have to find those answers for yourself. I always say, when it comes to strength, and we relate this to like a fitness thing, um, we're not born with it, right? It's not something that you're inherently born with. It's something, again, that we need to find within ourselves, right? Where is that strength? Where does it come from? And more often than not, that comes from those around us, um, our family, our friends. And that's something that we need to ultimately build, because you can have an outward appearance of strength, right? You can look strong, but I think I've always referred to it as there's two different types. There's an internal and an external, and that's the one that we need to develop.
Yeah, that's so true, because the perception, a lot of times, those of us who are very strong and resilient, the perception, well, from other people is that we have it all together. And that's what we like other people to see. We don't like them to be able to unwrap the package and see what's inside, and to see that inside we're kind of falling apart, right? And that all the pieces don't seem to fit together quite the way that they used to. And so I think that you're right. We're not born with strength. We develop strength over time. We develop it through facing these hardships. And then, as you said, having support, but again, turning internally and remembering that really and truly the only person that's going to get us through these situations is us. There's not going to be some divine intervention. I think so many times when we face problems, we're like, oh, can the answer just land on my doorstep? And wouldn't that be lovely? But it doesn't work that way. The answer never lands on our doorstep for some reason. But let's go back for a minute. What exactly happened during the pandemic? How did you go from all this stuff to a trickle down kind of effect of feeling like you had hit rock bottom?
The reason I kind of laugh is because what didn't happen for me during COVID, I lost my gym. I almost lost my father. I was on the phone with him every morning before work, and he was slipping away. I remember that vividly. Like you mentioned earlier, I lost my marriage. I also lost my properties. I lost 3 properties. I lost my dog. Um, Navigating COVID with a small business and team, and responsible for all of our clients and community. Um, it was just like a layered cake of emotions that were impossible to process for that reason. And I just told people that I was like undergoing some kind of transformation. It was my storm. And unfortunately, life as we know it, we all need to go through this at some point or another. I'm consoling a friend. He's going through his storm. I'm not unique in this by any means. We're all going to have to go through our own transformative storm. And it's recognizing, what stage of the storm we're in, whether we're entering into the eye of the storm, whether we're in the eye itself or exiting that eye of the storm. We have to also accept not necessarily, you can, embracing almost doesn't hurt either, but you need to accept the fact that you're in the storm. There isn't an answer that's just going to magically get you out of it. You have to endure it. You have to go through. And most often, these storms last not a couple of weeks or months, they last years. And my storm during COVID lasted a good 2.5 years. And so it's a ride that you're not getting off. You can kick and scream all you want. You're not getting off this thing. You've got to ride it out. And so I was able to, fortunately, like you said, like lean on some people, have some people around me for support. But at the end of the day, you do have to get through that thing yourself.
Yeah. That was really well put, because I do feel like how many times in my life I've been through a situation, and what I really want is to go around the bush. I don't want to go through the bush. I don't want to get all battered and bruised and prickled and scratched up. I really just want to find a way to go around it and have it be over. I remember going through a situation in my life one time, and I said to my friend, I wish I could just go to sleep and a year from now wake up and it's all going to be over and it's going to be resolved. And I think that so many times we do that, or we want that. We want there to be a way that we don't have to go through it. But in truth, it really is the only way to get through a situation. And often the pain and the difficulty and the aftermath does last a lot longer than we want it to. However, I would venture to say that if we try to avoid it, it lasts even longer.
Mm.
Because the more we try to go around it and not go through it, the more we're just taking steps in avoidance, and we're not really facing the things that we need to face. What do you think?
You're right. You can't run away from a problem. It's gonna fester. It's gonna become worse. And so going through it is just kind of like relinquishing control, or the perhaps the illusion that we had control in the first place. We like to think that we're in control of all of these things, but it's only when we truly perhaps submit and relinquish that illusion of control where we can actually potentially find a path, find an actual way. And that's where I think values, morals, a North Star, these types of things really come into play. Is how do we navigate through these storms if there is no way around it, right? And in this case, if we are a little bit more selfless in our day-to-day lives and as part of our calling or our work, and in my case, I have to take care of an entire community, multiple communities, clients, trainers, what have you. And just simply by putting perhaps other people's best interests even ahead of our own in those situations, you'll actually find a way forward. It's not completely a selfless act either, given that the moment you start helping other people, despite you suffering yourself, you very quickly realize that you're not alone, that everyone around you is suffering through something. In fact, their situation may even be worse than yours. And you start to become a little bit more grateful slowly that, oh my goodness, like, yeah, what I'm going through is bad. It's terrible. And yet it's still not nearly as bad as what other people may be going on around me. So I need to be grateful, maybe even for my current situation, because it could always be worse, whether we realize that or not.
I think I call that pouring in. I just said this to my daughter the other night. I said so many times what anchors me, because I call them anchor points. What are my anchors? Anchors are my support system. But also for me, a big anchor is what can I pour into? Because if I'm pouring into someone else, to your point, I am recognizing, realizing that I'm not alone and that everyone has their concerns. Because when you pour into somebody and you allow yourself to be a little vulnerable and show up for somebody, it comes back. And so then you have this circle of trust, this community of people who are all going through different situations. But Jesse, I want to reintroduce you. First of all, thank you all who are listening right now to Strong Mind, Strong Body. My name is Angie Miller. I'm the host, and I'm talking to Jesse Benson. He is an award-winning trainer and an NASM fitness educator. And Jesse, during the pandemic, really did hit rock bottom. He lost his marriage, he lost his pet, he lost his business, and basically he lost all of his income. And so what we're really doing is talking about how do we get back up? How do we fall and not stay down, but how do we rise to the occasion and come back stronger? So, Jesse, when all is said and done, how did this change your perception of success and failure?
Oh, great question. For starters, material possessions were not nearly as important as I previously thought and had pursued quite vigorously through my 20s and early 30s. I quickly realized what is a value in my life and what is not. The people, of course, those will also change. Like, you're not the same person. Once you've survived your storm and you come out the other end, you have changed. And as a result, the people around you will also change, including my life partner, who we now have an amazing partnership and team and relationship. And we're able to effectively rebuild our lives, because that's what needs to happen now is a complete rebuilding of our life. And that path looks completely different than the one that preceded it. And what's amazing is that once you're on the right path, just how quickly things can happen. Like, I went from struggling to just have one facility to now having multiple facilities and businesses and teams. All of these things are happening within the last 2 years. So I think, if you can look back on it in a positive mindset and say, you know what, that was actually something that helped me grow. It helped me become more resilient. It helped ground me and realize what's truly important in life. And now I've got a new path and way forward. That's what ultimately is going to put you onto the right track.
Yeah. And I think that you're right, because when you come out the other side of something, you're not the same person. Like, the person you see in the mirror is the same, but everything internally is completely rearranged and different. Your heart is in a different place, your head is in a different place. The way you see the world, the way you see yourself, the way you see people around you. And I always find that when we go through really, really difficult situations, sometimes our entire community changes and sometimes just pieces of our community change. Sometimes it's a life partner that no longer fits, or it's a best friend that no longer fits. Because sometimes when we change, people are either on board for that change, or we recognize that they fit into our life at that time, but they don't necessarily fit into our life with the person that we are now. So I think that's a key point. And I think it's also important to recognize that that's okay. Give yourself grace and compassion and say, it's okay. It's okay if those people don't fit into my world the way that they used to. I can still love them for who they are and who they are not. And I can recognize that right now in my journey, they're not the person for me. Right. So I think that was very well said. You know, when now that you've kind of, to me, you really have, like, it was multi-layered. It wasn't like one thing happened, multiple things happen. Has that changed how you approach risk and security in your life right now?
Another great question, Angie. I post COVID, I got small, like as conservative as could be. I had just battered a storm. I felt like a small boat in a big storm, and I had to batten down all the hatchets because I was just getting beaten and battered down for almost 3 years. And so post COVID, I was not in a risk taking entrepreneurial mindset at all. It actually took some time. And of course, my partner support and even a coach who really helped, both of them really helped bring me back, in a sense that I started to dream, hope, plan, take risks, again, which you're right is so incredibly important for us to do, because there's also a risk to not taking any risks, right? And so we have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. We have to keep climbing. We have to keep taking these risks in order for us to move forward, despite any uncertainty. And that's exactly what we did, taking on a facility that was 3 times the size of our previous facility right in downtown Vancouver. We expanded the team, we expanded the offering, we rebranded. We then opened a second location a year later.
Wow.
Like, we are now full steam ahead and growing. But that took some time.
Mhm.
It really did take some time. And I know that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of us are still not fully recovered from COVID. A lot of people say that however much time we spend in that storm, or in that period of time, or in that pandemic, is how much time it's going to take for us to recover from it. And I feel like that's pretty accurate. And so we do need to be patient with ourselves, but we also, to your point, need to recognize when it's time for us to start growing again and taking risks, and how important that is, because we can't stay stuck
Yeah.
for too long.
Yeah. Well, I think your analogy was really good. And I felt that one because you're like, hey, I felt like a really small boat in the middle of like this huge expanse of water. And, almost like you're insulated, like, oh, okay, I don't want you to get too close because I'm pretty raw. And if you touch me, I might fold. And then slowly but surely, I think we have to come out of it. And to your point, if we just give up on risk altogether, we're just going to continue to be so, so small. And you kind of answered my next question, because my next question was going to be, did you ever feel tempted to settle for less? And I think that's kind of what you're saying. Sure. Initially, you probably were tempted to be like, I'm just going to stay right where I am, until you started to shed the layers of grief and you were able to come out. And I do think, when I hear, if you don't mind me giving it a word, I call it grief, right? And we all process grief differently. And people like to put a timeline on grief, or they use Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's steps of grief. And we're all supposed to be linear. And then, gee, we get to acceptance. And it doesn't always happen that way, because sometimes we get to acceptance and then we go back to anger. And then we go through all the steps all over again, because that's grief, right? It's not a linear process.
Absolutely. It's messy, it's gray, it you're right. Like, and there's waves that can hit you. There's still waves that hit me with my dog. There's still waves that hit me from time to time, and that's completely normal. And you need to feel those, you need to take those on, process them, and continue moving forward. And what I'll just add to that ability to move forward was really having a supportive partner at the end of the day for me, which, I was totally wanting to play small. It was the most logical step for me at the time, was to just maybe rent or buy a home in the suburbs and train clients in the garage. Like, at that time, that was the most logical, safe move. Just, it was done, shut it down. The clients, the trainers, like, sorry, I tried my best, like, it's done. But she said no. She said, I want you at your best. And she meant it. And she supported me, right? Even from just cooking meals and helping rebuild my strength. And that support, for most people, is all that we need, right? It's just somebody to believe in you, somebody to say, you got this. I know you can do it. Get back in there, keep doing your best. And it wasn't easy. I'm not saying, because I had a supportive partner, I didn't have to work 7 days a week. I didn't have to put in 14, 16-hour days. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying I was able to do that because I had a supportive partner who wanted the best for me and us, so that we can rebuild a life together, right, at the end of the day. And now, 2 years in, we're finally at the point where we're able to comfortably. We're not working 12 hours anymore. We're able to, we've got our weekends, we're able to, we've got all different types of options now if we want to get back into the real estate market here in the most expensive city in the world. So it is totally possible to get fully back on your feet. And now there's all kinds of exciting opportunities that are presenting themselves. We have opportunities for more facilities. Like, my biggest problem or challenge now is that I have too many opportunities and not enough people to fulfill those. So you could call this a 180 or even a 360.
Yeah. You know what really stayed with me and actually caught me for a minute, and I was like, okay, don't cry, was when you said you just need somebody to say, I believe in you. And a lot of times, just hearing somebody say that and feeling that from another human is like, okay, sometimes our self belief goes down. But if there's somebody in whispering in our ear and saying, I believe in you, it picks that up. And we're like, okay, if I've got one person who believes in me, at least I know I can do this. So, Jesse, before we close the show, I just have one question for you. If there was a question that you wish I would have asked you, do you have one? Something you'd like to share?
That's a tough, challenging question. I'm going to do my absolute best here. And I think the only thing perhaps we didn't touch on was spirituality. So we talked a lot about strength when it comes to strength of the mind and strength of the body. And both of those are incredibly important. And we spend a lot of time in our body. We spend a lot of time in our mind. But I also think it's important for us to touch on our spiritual foundation. So the mind, body, and spirit connection, something that I now am putting a lot of people onto. I'm not pushing religion. All I'm simply asking people is, hey, yes, your mental health is important. Yes, your physical health is important. Let's get both of those healthy and strong. But do you also believe that you have a spirit, that you have a soul? And if you do believe that you have those, despite not being able to see them, kind of like our brain, you can't see it, but we know we have one, then let's explore that, because having a strong spiritual foundation is going to serve you in every single area of your life. Just simply believing is something that is bigger than ourselves at the end of the day.
Mm.
And I think that's where we can draw a lot of true strength from. It's just from having that spiritual awareness and grounding.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was going to ask you another question, and then I decided my question was going to be, what would you ask you? But you actually answered my other question, which would have been, what advice would you give to somebody when they feel like they've hit rock bottom? And that's a perfect answer, is lean into something bigger than you, lean into a sense of spirituality. Is there something bigger than you? Do you believe the universe is powerful? Do you believe that there is something you can not see, not touch, but something that gives you something to grasp onto, if you will? So how amazing that you actually answer my question. So, Jesse Benson, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you and they were like, hey, I have a question or I want to reach out to you, can you give us a real quick lowdown on how they can reach you?
Yeah, easiest way would be through my email address, jesse.fitness@gmail.com. My website, jessebenson.ca, is not live yet. It will be in the very near future. Otherwise, the other platform that I have is my Instagram account, which is just jesse.official, jessebenson.official. And that is where you can find me on Instagram. I'm happy to connect with coaches, owners, trainers, clients. I can be an absolute resource and happy to serve and help.
All right, awesome. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for digging deep into your heart and being willing to be vulnerable. Thanks to all of you for listening to Strong Mind, Strong Body. Again, I'm your host, Angie Miller. And in fact, if you want to reach out to me on Instagram, I'm Angie Miller Fitness, and my website's Angie Miller Wellness. So that way, if you have a question, I'm always available. See you soon.